Okay, if everything's working, then everyone should be about to see my live stream. And so I'd like to welcome you all to our first virtual meetup for ProductTank Wellington. And I don't think anyone could have imagined the world that we've just entered into only a few days ago even. But I'm really excited to be able to continue talking to you all. And through the help of Mind the Product and Jason, we've been able to put together a live stream and continue the conversations that we were planning to do anyway. So we already had this meetup planned, and so we've got four interesting people plus me who are going to be doing some lightning talks. I can see people are still joining the stream, so I'm just going to keep talking a little bit longer while people join in. What's amazing to me is that we had 133 people RSVPing to this stream, which tells me that you guys are still alive and kicking and wanting to listen and share what you're thinking about with this community. And this community is awesome, right? Like, this is amazing stuff that we can, through this amazingly difficult time, still create a little bit of normalcy amongst this craziness. And I don't know about everyone else, but it's been a bizarre time for me, like just seeing all this unfold and having to get used to different things, different routines, and the kids around today, and really just trying to get our heads around what the next few months are going to hold. So chins up, it's going to be all right in the end, and we're all here to support each other through that. So there's plenty of you still working, and so work hasn't stopped for a lot of you, and in fact a lot of you are working harder now than you've ever had to work, and so you should lean in on this community to try and help you, and so we're all here for that. So the format for today is that we've got five-minute talks, and we're going to be actually, before I go, I've got some comments down there. Can someone in the comments just let me know that they can hear me okay, that it's streaming? I can see Jace has just joined us. I didn't go to the stream in case I break something on my end. Or if any of the people in the panel can nod to tell me they can see the stream, that would be good. Yep, I've got a thumbs up from Martin. Awesome. Okay, awesome. So we're going to kick into it. So first up, we have got Martin, who is going to be doing a 5-minute talk about I don't want to hear about your MVP. And God's willing, I'm going to bring Martin in right now. Hi, Martin.
Hello.
So thank you for joining us, and you're one of the first people, I think, to put your hands up and offer to be a panelist and a lightning talker. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No worries. Yeah, good to be here.
What's going on in your world now? I mean, don't give me the long apocalyptic story that we've all got, but how's it going? You're coping? You're doing all right?
Well, day one, 3 kids and a puppy. So it's been an interesting day. I'm just glad it hasn't rained.
Yes.
Yeah. When we get a bad day, it's going to be a lot harder, I think.
Okay, we're good. All right. Now, I'm not going to be a vicious timekeeper. We said 5 minutes. Do your best, and we'll get the idea being, everyone, that we're going to do. We've got 5 people, 5-ish minutes, so that'll be about half an hour, or 50 minutes if I get going. But hopefully half an hour, and then we'll finish it wrapping up with comments. So all the people on the stream who are commenting now on the YouTube video, that's awesome, because I can see those videos, and I can at any time promote those to the stream, and then when we get into the panel, we can start answering any questions that you might put in there. So feel free to put questions in the stream when they come into mind, and then I'll go back and make sure they get answered when we get to the panel. So Martin, your screen is here. I'm gonna dip out so no one will be able to hear me. So you will have center stage, and then I'll come back in once you're finished. So over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I assume everyone can hear me okay. If not, send a stream of comments and hopefully someone will notice. Yeah, so my name is Martin, and I don't want to hear about your MVP. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Hopefully it's an interesting statement to some people. Some people will probably have heard me talk about this kind of thing before and know what I'm getting at. And in 5 minutes time, hopefully you all will. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this guy and this book. This guy is Eric Ries, who wrote that book. I'm sure almost all of you will already know about this book and kind of the core idea behind it. But just in case anybody doesn't, in a sentence or two, I'll sum it up. Basically, he's proposing an alternative to the default or historically default approach of startups, which is to go into a garage for 6 months, build a product, and then fire it out to a customer base and find out maybe that it works, but more likely that it doesn't. Or when I say works, it doesn't solve the customer problem, isn't valuable to enough customers, something like that. And so he proposes a bunch of sort of techniques and tools and frameworks and ways of thinking about things, which I almost entirely agree with, but I think he's made a couple of mistakes that have led to some misinterpretations as to what he means. So there's a couple of key kind of concepts or frameworks that are up here that I think are the main two culprits. First one is build, measure, learn, which is a cycle, and the second one is the MVP, or minimum viable product, which I'm sure you're all well familiar with the terms. So the problem with both of these is that, for me at least, they overemphasize the product in this. So when you're trying to build a startup, and indeed a new product for an existing company or even a feature, the kind of message that he's trying to get across is that it's not about what you're building. It's to start with, it's about what customer problem you're solving, and you don't know anything about your customers until you go and talk to them and try things out with them, and that's all about learning, not about building products. So build, measure, learn is wrong for me because it starts with build, and it should start with learn and go the other way. And likewise, MVP is wrong for me because of the word product. So both of these two things, even for a product manager, overemphasize product. Like I said, I think probably most of you are on board with this, as is the bulk of the community these days. And there's been a bunch of kind of different diagrams and things and different terminology that have been introduced to try and break this cycle and show that actually it's not about releasing the shittiest version of your product as early as possible so that you can tell the business that it's been done and move on to the next thing or whatever it might be, or start getting the money flowing. It's not that. It's a different thing. And so I'm going to talk about what I think should be different about the way we think about MVPs. So most products, projects, and startups these days, or maybe not most, but certainly many, start off with some form of canvas. There's a couple of examples here. The one on the top left is the lean canvas, which is from Ash Moria, and the bottom one is Jeff Patton's opportunity canvas, which is similar but a little bit sort of less startup oriented and a bit more generic. And so, as I said, many pieces of work start off with people sitting around a table completing these, which is great. And the reality is that in completing these, the business model or the proposition for the product is full of risks and assumptions, and that's what these red dots are meant to represent, with the size of the risk or the size of the assumption proportional to the size of the dot. So our idea is full of all these assumptions. Assumptions might be about what problems customers have, about what they care about, or about what they'll do. It might be about the technology, but those are usually the least worrisome assumptions. It might be about the business metrics that matter, that kind of stuff. And so in order to resolve these assumptions, people think, well, okay, well, what we need to do is get an MVP out there and learn from that. Big fat MVP. And so they go and look at what the minimum version of the product could be, build that and get it out there. And that's great. And that's definitely a step forward from polish it to the nth degree before you release it and then find out that you've got it wrong in some way. It's definitely better than that if you keep it minimal. But for me, that big green dot is still a bit of a waste. And apologies to any designers here. I know the colors are horrendous. So what I prefer to think, or how I prefer to think about it, is that if we take away all the fluff there in the background, and just focus on what these risks and assumptions are, and if we horizontally align them, and then if we reorder them by size, what you've got there is a learning backlog, where each dot is an assumptional risk that can be learnt about by some form of experiment. So I like to call these minimum viable experiments. So the minimum viable is still important, and actually this aligns to kind of what Eric Ray's proposes. You know, he's not proposing one big fat MVP that tests your entire business model. He actually does mean do a whole bunch of experiments that help you learn about things, and that's what this is intended to be. So before you build any form of product, the intention here is that you go through a sequence of de-risking activities that resolve your assumptions. And enable you to learn more about your product and your users as early as possible before you even build an early version. Once you've done that, then you can actually, you know, if you actually get through that roadmap without finding that one of your assumptions has been invalidated, you know, customers don't care about the problem you think they care about, or whatever it might be, then you still need to build the bigger, fatter MVP, and I'm okay with people calling that MVP if they must. I don't object to that term, as long as we have a clear distinction between an MVE that helps you figure out what the MVP should be and the MVP itself. So I don't want to hear about your MVP until you've done your MVEs. That's my message. Didn't keep track of time there, but hopefully that was 5-ish minutes.
Awesome. Hey, thanks very much. Now I'm going to save my thoughts and questions until we get to the panel. But thank you very much. You kept to almost perfectly there. Although I can't remember what, I think it was 6 or 7 you started, so that's pretty good. I'm very happy with that. Well done. All right. Hey, I'm going to kick you off, man, and I'm going to bring Lora onto the screen if I can. Hi, Lora. There you are. And
Hi.
I'm going to kick you off. Bye, Martin. And Lora, I'm going to get your screen up there. How amazing is this technology? It's just working right now. This is so good. Hey, thank you, Lora, for joining us. I know you're super busy, and this is probably the last thing you had planned or wanted to worry about in what has been a super bizarre week that we're all in the middle of this apocalyptic novel. But thank you. And I'm really interested to hear about what you have to say about embracing the chaos. I'm not going to do any more intro than that. I'm going to let you go and tell everyone about how they can embrace the chaos.
Thank you. Confusion, anarchy, disruption, unrest, instability, panic, disturbances, havoc, violence, crisis, darkness, collapse. All these words have a negative connotation. And do you know what else they have in common? Well, these are some of the words that are associated with the word chaos. Chaos. For some, the word chaos has a very negative connotation. Frameworks are developed, processes are put in place, and controls are introduced so that chaos can be tamed and controlled. Order, order, order. But is chaos really so bad? I believe that we can all agree that change is inevitable. And if change is inevitable, why can't we just accept that things will always be messy and chaotic? Probably because we are only human and we tend to seek structure, which helps us build habits and routines. And these routines give us comfort. However, I really believe that it is so important to fight this human instinct. Just remember that if you are comfortable, you're probably moving towards mediocrity. And if you want to grow, we must build an entirely new muscle around navigating unexpected events, inevitable failures, and lack of control. So we must not only learn to live with chaos, but embrace it and thrive with it. Embracing the chaos. This is exactly what chaos engineering does. So I want to talk shortly about what chaos engineering actually is and what we can all learn from it. Chaos engineering is based on the assumption that failures are inevitable and it's impossible to know when they could happen. So instead of trying to predict the future and build perfect systems, you simply try to manage failures constantly by creating scheduled chaos in your system so that you could accelerate your learnings. In other words, let go of trying to control the system and constantly test your assumptions about what will happen if something goes wrong so that you could learn as soon as possible and improve your system little by little. Then we come to the question, what can we learn from chaos engineering? Well, chaos obviously can accelerate our learnings. And I think it can be quite comforting to accept that we don't need to know all the answers and we don't need to build perfect systems. All we need to do is design small experiments, test our assumptions, and fix the system one small failure at a time. So today I would like to invite you to start building this new muscle around navigating unexpected events, inevitable failures, and lack of control. As a simple next step, maybe brainstorm 5 things that you're trying to control, and then write down what you assume will happen if you let go and embrace the chaos. And finally, design some simple experiments to test your assumptions so that you can compare what you think will happen to what actually happens when you embrace chaos. And remember that you don't have to figure everything out at once. Just breathe, take it day by day, and embrace chaos.
Thank you. That was cool. I've got lots of questions. I'm going to hammer you on the panel if I wasn't on the panel, but I can kind of hop between the panel and asking questions. But that was really interesting. Is your background engineering? Is that where you come from?
Yeah.
How long were you an engineer versus being in product?
I've worked in product companies for probably the last 5 years, and I've been an engineer for about 9 years.
Yeah, cool. I got asked by someone recently whether they wanted to get into product management, and they wanted to know, should I learn to be an engineer first? Do you have any thoughts on that? Not preempting the panel, but just a quick thought on whether engineering is a good background for product people?
I think that product managers come from all the walk of lives, and you can always bring something into product engineers no matter what your background is.
Yeah.
So I guess it also depends on the product, but yeah, sometimes it could be a good thing. Sometimes it might actually not help you that much because engineers have this bias of building.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's how we love solving problems, by building, but yes, usually many problems that are not worth building products for.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, thanks, Laura. I'm gonna rudely kick you off, and I'm gonna bring on Gregory, who's gonna join me. Let me find Gregory. Where are you, Gregory? Hello, Gregory. Nice to see you. Oh, we can't hear. Well, I can't hear you. Some technical difficulties here, folks. We're just gonna see if we can get Gregory. No, we still can't hear you, Gregory.
How about now?
Oh, yes. Now we can. Well saved.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you want to do a quick intro for yourself, like where you work? I probably should have done that for everyone. It shows how much preparation we've done for this stream. But give us a little bit of a background, where you come from, what brings you here.
Yeah, I am. My name's Greg. I moved from Canada to New Zealand with a bit of an engineering background, and I've kind of slowly been making the transition to product with my time at Moby2Go.
Nice. So working alongside Dave George
Yes.
in the product team there. Awesome. All right. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to bring your screen on, and I'm going to let you introduce and have your 5 minutes of fame, and you can do that now. Let me just disappear. Hang on. Bye.
Yeah, so the title of my talk is Launch Early and Learn. Kind of preempted by Martin's talk, but I'll go ahead anyways. We're Moby2Go, so we do online and app-based ordering and loyalty for a ton of brands in an increasingly international market. You've probably recognized by either our really terrible name or one of those technology stamps on the likes of Burger Fuel, Tank Juice, Sal's Pizza, Pita Pit, and a ton more. We've been diversifying our channels into the likes of some kind of in-store offerings as well, including table ordering. We intended to take our online platform and assume all of the information that we already knew about the customer based on the location that they're ordering from, and try and remove as many barriers associated with ordering as possible, because that's the name of the game. So we sold it to a brand, and we launched early. Even though the product wasn't the experience that we really intended, it took roughly 100 taps for the customer to order, 20 to choose their food, 12 for your phone, 4 for your password, and 23 for your credit card. We saw a conversion rate of about 60% of those who started an order. And the first order took about 2 minutes and 15 seconds, with obviously second orders being much faster because of the lack of the need for a credit card. So we kind of iterated on this product, moving towards kind of the MVP that we originally intended for this. And we made sign up optional. So now it only took 40 taps to order, 20 to choose your food, 23 for your credit card, and we saw a 79% conversion rate, with 52 seconds being the fastest first order. We found that after we removed the sign up, 97% of customers chose to guest order. As an aside, nobody wants to join your website or app. Signups are drastically overrated. But yeah, we saw, just for the removal of signup, we saw a 19% bump in conversion rate. So then we took a step forward, and a little bit later we released Apple and Google Pay. So now it only took 20 taps to order, and which included about 20 taps to choose your food and only 1 to pay. And we saw a 94% conversion rate. It was a 15% increase. We saw 29 seconds being the fastest first order. So before, we saw a 60% conversion rate with 2 minutes and 15 seconds for fastest first order. And then we saw that increase to 94% conversion rate with a 29-second fastest first order. So what did we learn? The impact of this was releasing early meant more money for the client. We really needed to reevaluate what our MVP was, because the value generated for the client was huge. 44% more orders than usual in store, and about $1,000 more revenue per week. But beyond the value the client derived, we learned a lot. With nixing the user details, we lost customer data, and data is important, but we realized that we can get that back with Apple and Google Pay. We also learned that we need to make second orders faster for those using credit cards, but also prioritizing the first order on all of our channels to make the process as streamlined and easy the first time around means that there probably will be a second order in the future. I do have a QR code, as fuzzy as that looks. If you scan that with your phone, you can kind of go through our demo flow and just see how kind of quick and easy it is. You spend most of your time kind of just browsing the menu and looking for the food. And I thought really I'd end with a cheesy quote: if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. Yeah, that's my talk.
Love how you guys are just on point with the 5 minutes. Beautiful lightning talk, exemplars. Thank you. That was super impressive stats. And what I loved about that, and I hope we talk about in the panel, is the extent to which, the definition of what it means to fail, right? Like you could argue the first release was a fail because it was so hard for people to get through, but you actually learned through that process and you could still make it better further on down the track, right?
Totally. We wouldn't have had any understanding of the impact of the individual decisions had we not incremented our approach.
Awesome. All right. Hey, thank you, Gregory. Now I'm going to bring on Nat from Hatch. And Gregory, we will see you back in the panel in a few minutes. Thank you. Here she is. Hi, Natalie. How's it going?
Good. Wow, crazy times.
Yes, crazy times. And I know I know of all the panelists, you also have been incredibly busy. You're right in the middle of some crazy equity markets and so on. So I really appreciate you taking a breath from what must have been a chaotic week to come talk to us. So what are you going to talk to us about today?
I think the title was it being unique in a world full of copycats. So
yes,
let's stick with that for now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get you to share your screen again because I don't see it here. Have you shared your screen?
Oh,
we're fighting with each other. I'm bringing you back. You're taking yourself out.
Yeah, I'm just going to do me. I was going to do an ocean, but now
you don't need a screen. If you don't need a screen, that's fine. I can just make you the.
Just make me. I'll be the star.
Okay, you will be the star. Okay, I love it. Okay, right. I'm going to make Natalie the star, and we'll take half of this rubbish off the screen and leave you to it. Where you go.
Okay, so everyone, just before I start, I'm an extrovert stuck at home alone for 4 weeks. So in about 32 hours, I'm going to need a lot more communication with people. And also, just as Tokes mentioned, when he emailed about an hour ago, I'd totally forgotten that this was happening tonight. So I was still in my pajamas and I hadn't planned anything to talk about. But leaving that aside, I think about this stuff a lot. So what I thought the best bet for today was to leave you with 2 tips. Find your blue ocean, then throw your textbook into it. So what does that mean? So blue ocean, I don't know how many other people work for a corporate. It's kind of a corporate term. And I am known for making a few jokes about corporates, but I just wanted to say they are made with love, especially in this environment. I really recognize the benefit of working at Kiwi Wealth, and it's been so brilliant in the manic last few weeks to know that we're giving Kiwis the security of knowing that their investments are safe with us. We're in it for the long term, economic downturn and everything. So lovingly joking about corporates. But back to blue ocean, the definition, it was kind of created by some guy, I imagine, somewhere. And the idea of it is that there's 2 types of corporate oceans. One is the blue ocean where you're swimming out on your own. It's clear, it's beautiful, you've got the world ahead of you. And the other one is the red ocean, which I can imagine, you can imagine what I'm saying here. It's full of blood, basically. Your competitors are the sharks coming after you. So why is blue ocean a big deal? Well, I think for the last 100 years or so, I think everyone's kind of convinced themselves that everything that needs to be invented has already been invented. And particularly now when it comes to tech, we are all nightmares for talking about things like being the Uber of this or the Airbnb of this. And I just think that's such a bad philosophy. So find your blue ocean, and 2 companies that get pulled out time and time again for this are the likes of Apple and Tesla. Apple didn't invent phones and they didn't invent music players, but what they did is find a blue ocean. They said, what's the actual problem that people were trying to solve here? And they created something that revolutionized how people use their phones and have music alongside them. No longer do you have to have a huge big CD player that jumped when you went for a run, which used to be my life. And Hatch was founded on the same philosophy, the joy of working through a corporate. And one of the things we looked for when we started was to find a problem that no one had tried to solve here before. So we were the first and only to launch US share markets and make them easy and affordable for New Zealanders to access. We recognize now there's a ton of competition coming after us and they'll create a red ocean. But as with Apple and Tesla and anyone who finds a blue ocean, the best part for your competitive advantage when you're creating any product is while your competitors are trying to come at you and turning the ocean red, you're already focused on the next blue ocean, and which is just substantial. It's such a huge advantage. So highly, highly recommend everyone find your blue ocean when it comes to creating a product. Then the second point, I think I'm still fine, is throw your textbook in it. So now you've found your problem and your audience and you know them deeply. One of the things I've been talking about a lot recently with people is kind of the two approaches to product. And one is the textbook approach and the other one is the pragmatic approach. And when you are looking at creating something from scratch for an entirely new audience, a completely different product, the research from the past and interviews that other people have done are of only limited use to you, and knowing that someone's button turning green made them have X amount of different conversions, and always having your menu on the left is kind of the way to do it. I would highly recommend throwing that rule book out and actually deeply learning your customers and designing an amazing blue ocean solution that works for them and is custom designed for them, because their experience and their needs are probably very different from what you may read about in the textbook. So you have this other huge competitive advantage by being the only person to solve their problems and to solve them extremely, extremely well. So I hope that's about 5 minutes. Find your blue ocean, throw your textbook in it. And just one last thing, if anyone's after a sanity saver while we're stuck at home, and this is not blue ocean, but Marco Polo, just discovered that app, and I'm getting daily baby pooping updates and family dance-offs. That's really filling in the time. So when ProductTank's not on, highly recommend starting some groups in that.
Excellent. I love it. Hey, thank you. And I love presentations without a presentation. That was,
I mean, it's a bit of a lack of time thing.
No, that's good. I think lack of time creates a certain level of energy, which is, I think it's good. I don't think you need to over-prepare these things. So thank you very much. We've got a few questions on the thing. Oh no, shit. I knew I was going to do that. I realized that, shit, I've got to talk. So I'm going to say some things. So I'm now going to kick Natalie off, and I'm going to be the only one left speaking. So give me a sec, and I will get my my slides on. Here I am. Hey, so what I want to talk about is it's something. If you've ever talked to me for more than 5 minutes, I've probably said something like this. So apologies if you've heard it before. But I've got this bee in my bonnet about saying no, and sometimes you feel like you want to say no all the time. But my thesis is that you should never say it, and I don't necessarily mean that you should always say yes, but I definitely don't think you should be saying no. And there's lots of reasons that you want to say no, right? Like you want to say no because how dare they come to you with another request? They've already given you 65 and you can only do 3, and you've only got 5 people, not 500, and you haven't got enough time to do anything that they ask you for anyway, and they've forgotten that they even asked you last week that they're going to do something else. So there's lots of really good reasons why you might be in a position where you want to say, I don't think so, and to show them the hand. But my thinking about this is that is rarely the right thing to do. Now, sometimes there might be some extreme cases where they're really taking the piss and you just got to show them the door. But I think it's a bad product management strategy to sit there and say no. And one of the main reasons is that humans have this really deep-seated need to be heard, right? Nobody is coming to you and braving a conversation with you who they know is super busy with an idea that they think is terrible. They're coming to you because they feel like you need to hear this. And when people don't feel heard, they make a lot of assumptions about who's not hearing them. And so I've talked to lots of companies over the last 2.5 years in particular, but over my career, I've talked to lots of people, and they often describe to me somebody in the organization who's the no person. They go, oh, I'll go and talk to Jane. I know she's just going to say no, but I feel like I need to talk to her about it and tell her, or Jimmy's really owning this. There's this thing he really needs to know. I'm worried about going to talk to them because He normally says no. Even if I can talk him around, it's always a bit difficult. And what happens is that people stop coming to you, right? Like if you're someone who just says, no, I've already made my plan. No, I don't want to hear it. Then nobody wants to talk to you. And a fundamental part of your role as a product manager and even a product owner, right? Anyone who's leading product in any capacity, it's your job to be a free-flowing conduit of information. And you need to be a sponge for that. And you need to make other humans feel heard so that they're not afraid to come to you. But that doesn't, like I say, necessarily mean that every human that comes to you, you don't listen to them and say, yeah, totally, we're going to do that. That's such a great idea. I love you. It doesn't mean that, but it also doesn't mean just showing them the hand. I think one of the things that people misunderstand about their role as a product leader is that they often feel like a bodyguard to the team, right? So they're going, I've created this roadmap for the team. They're executing. I don't want a single distraction to bother them. So whatever happens, if anything comes, I'm there to flak it. I've got my, my shields up, and I'm making sure that nobody can come in. And I do that with my no shield. I say, no, you can't have that. No, you can't have that. We've already decided what we're doing. And they become this bodyguard rather than realizing that their role is actually a seeker of value. So it's not okay to doggedly hold on to a roadmap that might actually not be the best use of time, right? I do a course for product managers, and one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, what's the value proposition of a product manager? And my conjecture is that a value proposition of a product manager is to maximize the return on investment and the efforts of your team or teams that you're working with. And so that means sometimes you have to listen to ideas that are better than the ones you're executing on right now. And that sometimes takes a brave change of direction. And sometimes your team can hate you for it because they go, why are you telling us to do something else? Last week you told us to do this. But if it happens to be the best thing for the team and that input came from somebody who was asking you for something, then sometimes it might be actually, yeah, that's a really good idea. It's not what we had planned, but I think it's a better idea than what we had in the gun. The other reason people come to you, right, is because they don't know it's impossible. They don't know that you've got a million things to do with a restricted, constrained resource. You've got the CEO screaming at you for results. You get even asking you when it's going to be delivered. They don't know that what they are asking you for is impossible. So another big part of your role as a product manager is to communicate exactly not just what you're doing. It's not enough to say, I'm too busy. I can't fit in anything else with the resources I have. That's the wrong answer. But you can say, the reason this is impossible right now is because we're doubling down on this particular strategic direction. The reason we're doing these things is because we're trying to move these needles. And the thing you're asking us to do right now is not possible without compromising our strategic lens. And so if you don't know what the product strategy is, if you don't know why you're doing the things that you're doing right now, if you're not communicating out to the stakeholders in the business the rationale behind why you're doing things, if all you're doing is saying, this is what I'm doing, then they're going to come to you with their ideas that they think are better. But if you say why you're doing the things you're doing and why it aligns with a greater purpose and what the impact of the things you're doing are, then it's much less likely that they come to you with a big distraction that's going to derail everything you're working on. Because your job is to bring them along the ride to make sure they understand that you're doing the best you can to maximize the value of the investment that's been done by the people you're working with. So in reflection, when someone comes to you and you want to say no, then your job is to listen, is to really hear what they're asking you. And they're asking you for a reason, right? They're coming from a perspective that you may not have all the information from. So you need to listen. You need to understand what's being asked of you. Most of the time, I think if it's a major thing, you should say, okay, I want to take that away and think about that, and I'm going to come back to you. So it's often the case that you want to just shoot back and say, oh, no, that's a crazy idea. I don't think we should do that. We're doing this because it's much more important. I think people will feel much better and be much more likely to come back to you, will feel much better if the ultimate answer is no, if you say, I'm going to come back to you tomorrow with a decision. And then you come back with either, I love that idea, and we're going to derail everything we work. Well, you wouldn't say derail. I'm going to change direction because that's a much better thing to be doing than we're doing now. Or more likely you say, that's a great idea. I don't think we can do it right now with what's on our roadmap. We're going to tackle that later, and give them some idea of when you might get to that. And then put a reminder in your calendar to get back to them, to make sure that they really feel heard and they really think you're understanding them. I'm going to stop there. I could talk forever on this topic. I love this topic. But thank you, everyone. And the end. Okay, I'm going to bring everybody else back in, and we're going to see if we can manage to do a panel in this format. So, hi, everybody. So we're all back in. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So one of the magic things about this technology that we're using is that I can promote any comments that anybody puts in there. So now's the time to add some comments in the screen, in the YouTube channel if you've got any. So people have already done it, and what I'm gonna show you what happens when amazing people like Chloe and Thomas have asked some questions of us. And so the first comment is from Chloe, who is talking about loving the idea of embracing the chaos. And so Laura, she's asking about how you get the balance that versus meeting set deadlines for releases where chaos is not allowed.
I guess it comes also back to what you Tokes were talking about, like listening to people, understanding, reflecting, and then coming back to them if you think that what they ask you to do and it's like maybe unexpected can be done. But to answer Chloe's question, obviously if something unexpected comes up and and you have a set deadline, if you have a set deadline, then I guess you always have to play with the scope. You either have fixed scope or fixed deadline. You can't have both. So that's your way of playing with the unexpected in this case.
I guess a lot of people, like if you said to a CEO, say that you're embracing chaos, then that you're assuming we're going to fail, and that's fine because we're just going to deal with it. And they interpret that as you cannot fail with this next release. It means everything to this business. Nothing can go wrong because this business will crumble if you fail in any way. Like, how do you translate this idea of failing? Maybe the word fail is wrong, right? Maybe it's not failing, but not doing as much as you could, but in the engineering context, maybe it really is failing. Like, is it failing, and does it translate into product failing as well as engineering failing?
I guess in engineering we are talking about your system failing in a way, but what is better, that your system fails when you have put measures in place to be able to detect these failures and respond to it as soon as possible, or having a failure like when no one is available or working and you're not prepared for it. So I guess this is the idea of having these control failures, and everyone is like constantly breaking things so that you can get used to fixing them as soon as possible. And if we translate this to product, I guess this would be the idea of having this MVP that I think Martin talked about, or having the minimum viable experiment. So how you can run some experiments so that you can learn and then actually build something that is actually the minimum viable product, or you build something big that is your fixed release and then it's a complete failure and loss of time.
In addition to what Shane said there, I agree. Learning to fail small is the trick. Hence the the small circles on my side versus the big MVP one. Also, failing early is key. So you want to figure out, what are the things that we anticipate could go wrong here? What are we assuming? And how can we find out whether we're wrong or right as early as possible and as cheaply as possible? Because just like introducing a defect or finding a defect in code is much easier to fix, while that piece of work is still in progress than it is once it's gone out to users. Finding out that your assumption was wrong is much easier to deal with if you find out earlier. The other thing I wanted to say was that I think I increasingly, even outside the sort of the the realms of tech companies and so on, where people tend to be a bit more agreeable to the concept, these kind of concepts. Increasingly, other organizations are becoming aware of the need to prioritize adaptability and agility and the ability to deal with the unknown over the ability to plan to the nth degree and get it right up front. It's actually the same argument as agile, right? But just kind of zoomed out to all of business rather than just software.
Yeah, I still questioning the word failure, because failure for me, like, there's elements of failure that are okay, right? Like, it's okay, I don't know, for maybe every now and then your site's down, you'll rally around and you bring it back up again. Like, that's a failure that doesn't stop somebody doing their business. Most people accept shit happens, right? But for Natalie, it's not okay to fail by placing a buy order when they wanted to do a sell order. Like, that's not okay. That's a failure that is unacceptable in anyone's definition of failure. And I'm still trying to, like, in product land, they don't talk about failing. They'll talk about failing safely. And even then, I don't even think failure is the right word, right? Like, I think Gregory's example of not doing the ultimate solution early to find out how you can build a better solution feels like a nicer interpretation, maybe. And like, you'll never get the perfect UX. You'll never get the perfect design. You'll never get the perfect workflow. And don't be afraid to go out with something that you're a little bit embarrassed about because it's not perfect, not great. But is that the same message, or is that a different message that you're thinking about, Lora, when you're talking about embracing the chaos? Or are you still bringing it from a technical perspective?
I was thinking probably more in line with how the life of a product manager is a complete chaos. There's so many unexpected things happening, and how you can maybe bring it one step further, where you're like, okay, there's like all this chaos happening. How can I actually introduce so much even more chaos so that I get used to it? Then everything, no matter what happens, it's business as usual. Like, you don't care. And the idea is like just to probably think of like what can you do so that you make such small experiments and then see, okay, yeah, shit hit the fan, but I'm prepared for it. I can deal with anything.
Yeah, I like the idea of resilience of product managers to shit happens, because it does always happen, right? Like, I think that's a valid point. And Chloe's talking about bringing designers who are perhaps the worst. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Who are often fighting for something beyond what the team would like to do, and conspiring against getting out there early. And there are, maybe Natalie, you can talk to this. You used to be a designer, right? Like, whether you can talk to this balance between the perfect solution and the best that we can do solution.
I might have heard it here in this group or somewhere else, but one mantra I live my life by is the one-way door versus the two-way door. Do you know about that concept? Yeah, this probably was from here, so I'm stealing it and giving it back to you. But I think there are some big things that you can't go back from. You make the decision, so it could be something super fundamental that unwinding it is really hard. So you have to sit down and really plan those things and get them right, regardless of what you're doing. The two-way doors, you can afford to experiment a bit. So I think in this case, it, to me, feels like really recognizing what each decision is. So I think when people worry that every use case isn't going to be met, and especially with the way I approach things and we've approached them at Hatch, is to go, yeah, of course, every use case shouldn't be addressed up front. We want to be really tight with our audience and really tight with what we offer them and know them in depthly, and all the rest of it will come in the future. And each time we make a decision, we're making it going, what is this? Which door is this? And it kind of makes the decisions a lot simpler. And then sometimes designers get to do stuff really quickly and cover off all use cases because it makes sense, and other times they don't, but you've put structure around the decision making, so it's not opinions anymore.
Yeah, totally. And I remember when I was more actively a product manager that I had to really remind myself as to whether I was fighting for a two-door thing or a one-door thing. And I often found myself going, I'm fighting for something that actually doesn't really matter. Even if I have a different opinion, the team has a different opinion, they should just do their idea because it actually doesn't matter. It's easy to wind it back and I should just stay out of it. And I had to learn that a number of times, not to put my opinion too strongly on a two-door issue. We've got another one here. Gregory, you might want to touch on this one. So one of the things about going, if a designer says, I can't believe you're going to release that, that's awful, no one's going to use that, but you clearly either didn't have a designer or had a good relationship with them and decided to convince them that this was okay, we can learn something from this. How did that conversation go for you?
Our designer, he's well equipped to, our designers are definitely well equipped to handle the fact that, you know, sometimes things don't go as planned. And it was more the issue that the client had a launch date that we had to meet that we weren't going to quite to meet. And we had 3 problems to solve. We had to get them to order right away. We had to find a way for them to order individually, and it needed to be easy for them to finish. And we kind of accomplished a few of those goals. Like our platform has always been around to, our platform has always existed to try and remove barriers. So we just needed to continue to remove barriers. It was a bit of a, I'm struggling to find a term that's stream appropriate, but it was a bit rough, I think, initially, but ultimately, you know, with the promise, with the client, with the promise of moving forward and kind of iterating on the MVP and telling them it was going to get better. And then also with the client being directly involved with the process, they feel like they can take a little bit of ownership in it as well and see the product evolve as we released it. And they can kind of feel a sense of success even before we'd release the final product, and, you know, continually iterating at this point as well.
Yeah, I used to use the term that nobody liked, but I feel like sums it up. It's good enough. It's good enough to release and learn something. It's good enough not to kill the business. It's good enough to go forward on. And it sounds a little bit glass half full, but it still feels like if you're always striving for perfection, you're going to be hitting yourself against the brick wall for a long time and find it hard to get anything out there. I have a question, and I'm having this question because I'm giving the audience a chance to write some things down. But I had a question for Nat. When you were talking about your blue ocean and throwing the textbook out, and I was thinking, yeah, like the hippie rebel in me is going, yeah, let's just reinvent it. Let's just do it ourselves. I love it. I don't want to read anyone else's ideas. I've got ideas of my own. My customers are different. But then sometimes I check myself and I worry that I'm going to miss something. I'm going to reinvent a wheel. I'm going to miss something obvious because I didn't do enough scanning of the horizon about what the textbooks might have led me towards had I spent the time to read them. Like how much do you go on instinct and just forget everything that people have said versus digesting what they have said and adapting from there?
Yeah, I mean, this was a lightning talk, so I could have gone into a lot more detail. I think one of the things about working in product for a long time is you kind of, that instinct is built. I love the book Blink and Don't Make Me Think and all those sorts of books that kind of explain that kind of inbuilt knowledge that you start to get, that you kind of go, over my career, 90% of the time this has been the right way, so you can start to kind of apply some of those patterns. But I think the important takeaway for me is to always question them, and I think it's having had conversations through the years with people who kind of go, it always must be done this way, and I think there's a difference between going, actually it makes sense to do it this way this time, versus this is my mantra and I will always live by it. So absolutely, like I think, you know, button sizes should be big enough for people to click. And with Hatch is another good example. We created, we borrowed from other industries, so we created a shopping experience when it comes to investing, because that's what made sense for us. So it's not, I say throwing the textbook away, but maybe it's because it sounded really good with the blue ocean and you're throwing the textbook into it.
Oh, I love it.
But it's probably more, you know, not thinking of it as a Bible and thinking of it as more of a starting point.
Yeah, because I think if you rely on the textbook too much, you forget about your underlying reason for being, which is to address those customer needs and And there are subtle differences across the board in different products and different customer needs and different times, different markets, different environments that make it, people make millions from creating textbooks that make it sound easy, but then you're often in the driving seat when it doesn't feel quite so easy as those textbooks maybe made it sound.
Oh, and there's always opportunity, right? It's like nothing becomes a revolution if it's just evolution of what's already there. And I obviously am like mad keen on creating things that are different and change the way people do stuff. So for me, it's an exciting challenge rather than yeah, this is kind of the easiest road, well-traveled option.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the MVP, MVE conversation. Like, the MVP is much maligned. People kind of, get sick of hearing a little bit because, designers hate it because it sounds like you're compromising every design strategy ever. It's like you say, it's always referring about the products. Do you think of MVP, Martin, in terms of like even the very minutiae of changes you might do? We often talk about MVP as the big things, the whole product's going into a new market. What's the MVP of that whole product, rather than what's the MVP of that shift of UX that we're going to do over here? Like, how do you think of it differently when it's at a different scale than an entire new product entering the market?
Kinda. I think if you're talking about the UX of a button or something like that, then there is that's almost binary. There's no minimum version of that. Changing that can't be less than what it is. You know what I mean? But maybe there are still some risks or assumptions around that you wanna mitigate. So if you're highly dependent on that button for your revenue, then you maybe don't want to take that risk and risk the opposite effect of what Moby Go got, which was everything was going that way. You might change it and everything might go that way. And if that's going to happen, you don't want that to happen to everybody. So your experiment which is I guess it's an MVP. And there isn't, in that case, there wouldn't be an MVE, there wouldn't be an MVP because there's no minimum version of the product. But the MVE would be, instead of minimizing the amount of build you do, you minimize the amount of exposure you have by just delivering it to a small number of customers. So that's the old A/B test or something like that. So it's not always the amount of build that has to vary. It could be something else.
And so in your world, do you not really refer to MVPs beyond initial launches of big things? Then you start not using that terminology and more about, because I used to reframe the definition of MVP. I used to describe it as, and it's not really MVP, but it's a useful construct in terms of it's the least I can release. It's the least I can release to learn something about someone. And I used to like that framing because it got you out there early. It forced you to think about, well, what do I want to learn? And it also forced you to restrict your attention to a group of people, not everybody. Because often when you're doing MVP, it's like, I'm launching this brand new product. Everyone's going to see it on day one. It's got to be good for everyone. Whereas that's really what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I would in that case I would call that an MVE. That's a hey, we haven't committed to this thing yet. We aren't building a product, and we are just trying to learn more about, as you say, about someone or something, so that if we decide to throw everything and build it, then we've got the greatest possible level of confidence that it's going to work, and therefore letting the designers go to town on making it awesome is more amenable. I want to be more positive about that because I'm pretty confident this is the right feature or right product that creates the right outcome for users.
So we're in the quite unique position of Phil not being able to ask 65 questions and have them all posted to the group. So this is kind of must be entirely frustrating for Phil. But I'm glad you promote Phil's question because it's a good one. Like he's asking with your MVE is really just the research part of designing prototypes, getting that early feedback. And I guess this leads to we think about this. We're worried about experimentation and minimal product because we're worried it's going to get in front of real customers who are trying to do real things and run real businesses, and whether we can bring this back a little bit behind the production environment and learn stuff before we even go live.
Yeah, and I think to answer Phil's question there, yes, research and user testing is a type of MVE. God, I'm trying to get the acronym right. But it's not the only type. It depends what it is you're trying to test. I think research and user testing, especially of design prototypes, is still all about solution. It's all about validating. Does my solution solve the problem? What's cute?
Sorry. I agree. Hey, I'm going to take the little Phil sideshow off there. Yeah, Carol.
Quickly finished. So yes, but what if you're trying to validate something that's not the solution? Like, what if you're trying to validate how much somebody will pay for something, or do they even care? Are they interested? Yeah, yes. If I had that problem, yes, this solution would work. That's one type of test. But what if you need to find out whether a sufficient number of people in your user base actually have the problem?
Yes. Yeah, and I still think there's a balance between, yes, you can do a whole lot of testing offline and with test groups, with prototypes, with specialist groups, but I really I'd love to see people being braver in product, and not brave to break things in production, but like brave to learn more about real behaviors and real appetite for change for real customers in your product at the time they might need that thing. And like, I'd love to see people exploring more that, rather than trying to find a sample group that represents, a million users or 10 users. It's, I think that's kind of, you're making massive leaps of assumptions if you experiment outside of production sometimes. So Brett's asking about, I don't know how many of you here would think you're representing big companies rather than smaller companies. Show of hands who represent startups. Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know where you work, Lora. Where do you work, Lora?
I work at a company. It's called Enroller. It's a very small startup.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. It's like the appetite for failing fast for bigger companies is a much harder sell. Have any of you worked at bigger companies where you've tried to introduce this idea of failing and had it pushed back? You want to talk about that?
A little bit. At a certain large auction-based company in New Zealand, definitely pushed for this. And I think I don't think conceptually it was a hard sell. I think people kind of get the concept and appreciate the concept. But in reality, when you've got a roadmap of things to be done, and experimentation looks like a luxury that takes more, makes things take longer. And if you were definitely right about a feature adding some value, then experimenting first to validate that and then building the feature is going to take longer than just building the feature. But the reality is that more than 50% of the time you're not right about that, and that's what's hard to get across to people. Yeah,
totally. Hey, I'm conscious of the time. It's 7:04. We've been going for an hour. Everyone's probably getting hungry, tummy rumbling. Any final thoughts from the panel that they wanted to get off the chest and share with the hordes?
I just wanted to follow up quickly on that one.
Yes.
Don't try and sell. Show them. And like Hatch is a prime example of this. KiwiWealth's got what, like 140 employees, huge brand recognition in the Kiwi group. So much could go wrong. So much room for panic if you wanted to. But we didn't spend hours and hours writing white papers, and we just started to show them our research, and we started to show them the early success and that kind of failing fast on little small things of, not delivering the polished product that they might have expected and all that sort of stuff. And it is amazing. 1.5 years later, I think the culture of the organization has somewhat changed to just really getting excited about putting stuff out there quickly and the huge benefits to the company of doing that. So yeah, I would never bother trying to sell anyone on it. I'd just start doing it.
And do you always adapt forward rather than, have you done stuff and you've gone, whoa, that was a terrible idea, and pulled it out? Or have you always sort of like moved forward to try and make it better?
I mean, I'm sure we have. Well,
that's something, right? That's a really hard thing to do because there'll be one person who loves it, right?
Yeah, and I think I mean, there's different things you can put in place to make sure not only one person loves it. And I think I can't see who's doing what at the moment, but the idea of don't ask people if they'd pay for it, just actually try and get their money. And I think that sort of testing before failing or trying stuff is a huge deal, being really careful about how you phrase things and the research you do. And there's all sorts of those techniques that you actually get people to sign on the dotted line. And I'm not sure if Moby to Go did that sort of stuff as well, of just like, will you actually pay now? Okay, well, here's the paper, hand over your cash. And yeah, so I think it minimizes the amount you need to roll back. And normally most of the stuff we launch is an MVP anyway, so it can roll out in any direction from there.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm gonna call it quits, and I want to thank you all for being part of our first of, I suspect, many online ProductTank meetups. It's been really good. You guys have all got really unique perspectives and shared a lot of great stuff. So thank you very much. And thank you all for the people who joined in. We had at least 50 live subscribers in there at one point. I'm sure lots of people will watch this video up on YouTube in the days to follow if they couldn't make it tonight. So a big thank you from me, and we'll see you hopefully in person soon, but if not, in another virtual stream. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.
See ya.